Have you ever loved someone so deeply that you gave them everything, only to be met with coldness, distance, and silence in return? What if I told you that the greatest revenge in that situation isn't shouting, fighting, or proving your worth, but walking away in silence and letting that silence speak louder than any words ever could? The quiet revenge of a super empath against the cold distance of a dismissive avoidant. When most people hear the word revenge, their minds quickly picture shouting matches, dramatic breakups, or carefully planned tricks meant to hurt someone back. But in reality, the strongest form of revenge is almost never loud. The truth is that the quietest kind of revenge can often be the most powerful and long-lasting. Today, I want to explore the silent revenge of a super empath against the emotional coldness of a dismissive, avoidant partner. This is not about cruelty, not about games, and not about trying to hurt another person on purpose. This is about power, the type of power that appears when an empath, who once gave endless love, time, and energy to someone else, finally decides to turn all that care inward. It's about the moment they break free from the painful cycle of coldness and allow their silence to become the clearest, loudest message they have ever spoken. And make no mistake about it, when a super empath chooses silence instead of words, that silence shakes a dismissive avoidant all the way to their core. To understand why this dynamic cuts so deeply, we first need to look at the two sides. A super empath is not just empathetic in the usual sense. They are extremely intuitive, endlessly nurturing, and emotionally generous to a degree that feels almost otherworldly. They have a unique gift, the ability to feel another person's hidden pain and wounds, even when that person works hard to hide behind walls of coldness and distance. On the other side is the dismissive avoidant, a person who has mastered the art of seeming unbothered. They minimize emotions. They pull away whenever closeness threatens, and they carry themselves as if love itself is a suffocating cage. This creates a heartbreaking loop. The empath keeps giving more, believing that one day their kindness will melt the ice. They hope that if they love harder, show more patience, and pour more care into the relationship, the avoidant will finally soften. Meanwhile, the avoidant keeps growing colder, hiding deeper within themselves, protecting their heart from the intimacy they secretly fear. For the empath, this cycle feels like rejection over and over again. For the avoidant, it feels like survival, like the only way they can breathe. But here is the truth. Even the most selfless super empath eventually hits a breaking point, and the beginning of silent revenge shows itself exactly at that point. It doesn't start with hatred, shouting, or anger. It begins with clarity. For so long, the empath tries to explain themselves, to heal, to fix, to prove their value, to show they are worthy of being loved. But one day, something clicks inside them. They realize a life-changing truth. No amount of love can force an avoidant to love in the way they need. No level of patience can force real intimacy in a place where fear still rules the heart. And instead of running after the avoidant, instead of begging or pleading, instead of fighting for attention, they do something far more powerful and shocking. They withdraw. They go silent. They stop justifying themselves. They stop over-explaining. They stop trying to carry the weight of two people's emotions. They pull back their energy like the tide retreating from the shore. For the dismissive avoidant, who has quietly grown used to the constant warmth of the empath's presence, this sudden silence feels like an earthquake. You see, dismissive avoidants often take pride in believing they are fully independent, fully detached, and free from needing anyone. They convince themselves they can survive without love, without deep bonds, without emotional closeness. But that belief gets tested the moment the super empath truly goes quiet. Because even though they build walls and act untouched, Dismissive avoidants do, over time, become accustomed to having someone who accepts them and loves them unconditionally. They may not say it, and they may not show it openly, but they lean on that stream of validation, affection, and care more than they admit. When that stream suddenly dries up, they are forced to face the emptiness of their own isolation. The empath doesn't have to shout, doesn't have to argue, doesn't have to prove anything anymore. Their absence speaks volumes. Their silence carries a weight heavier than any fight, heavier than any long speech could ever carry. And this is where the real revenge quietly unfolds. The empath is not choosing silence to punish the avoidant, though that is how it may feel to the other side. They are choosing silence to finally heal. Their quiet is not a weapon meant to destroy. It is a boundary meant to protect. It is a clear and powerful statement that their worth will no longer be measured by how much pain they can tolerate or how much rejection they can survive. The empath slowly begins to turn their energy back toward themselves. Instead of always scanning their partner's moods and walking on emotional eggshells, they start paying attention to their own feelings. Instead of waiting endlessly for tiny crumbs of affection, they begin to give themselves what they have always deserved: love, kindness, respect, and care. The avoidant might misinterpret this shift as abandonment, but in truth, it is freedom. The empath finally understands that their real strength was never found in trying to fix or heal other people. Their true power was always in choosing themselves first. And this is where the paradox appears, the quiet change that makes silence so powerful and unsettling. While the empath grows, blossoms, and becomes lighter, the avoidant begins to sense cracks forming in their once solid armor. At first, they may convince themselves they don't care at all. They'll throw themselves into distractions, drown in work, seek comfort in casual encounters, or hide in solitude. Yet deep inside, something stirs. They begin to notice the missing pieces, the absence of those small, caring messages, the gentle check-ins that used to arrive without fail, the warmth that once lingered in the air but no longer fills the room. They may never openly admit it, but the silence gnaws at them. For the first time, they are not the ones pulling away. This time, it is the empath who has withdrawn. That sudden reversal of roles shakes them in ways they never expected. To understand why this silence pierces a dismissive avoidant so deeply, we need to see the dynamic they are used to. They are accustomed to holding control over the pace of closeness and distance. They retreat, others chase. They create space, others rush to fill it. It has always been their rhythm, their game of control. But when a super empath decides not to chase anymore, the avoidant loses that control. Suddenly, they are forced to face a truth they worked hard to avoid. Their coldness, their distance, no longer makes the empath try harder. Instead, it pushes the empath farther away. And it is in that moment of realization that regret slowly creeps in. Not because the avoidant has suddenly discovered how to love deeply, but because they recognize that they have lost someone who loved them with an intensity that went beyond limits. For the empath, this shift is nothing short of transformation. In the beginning, silence feels unfamiliar, even heavy. There may be an urge to reach out, to explain, to fix, to slide back into the old, exhausting cycle. But as the days stretch into weeks, something amazing begins to happen. The empath feels lighter in spirit. Their energy, once drained by endless giving, slowly returns. They find themselves laughing again, sleeping more peacefully, dreaming bigger than before. They realize that their worth was never tied to how much love they could pour into someone who resisted receiving it. Their silence becomes a mirror, reflecting back their true strength. That strength becomes the sweetest form of silent revenge, not because it wounds the avoidant, but because it liberates the empath. Meanwhile, the avoidant's regret is often delayed. In the beginning, they tell themselves stories to stay comfortable. They rationalize the loss, insisting that they never truly needed the empath anyway. But time has a way of peeling away defenses. Months later, in some quiet moment of loneliness or vulnerability, memories surface. They remember the super empath, the way they were deeply understood without needing to explain, the way they were loved without any conditions, the way they were cared for without demands. And in those moments, the truth hits hard. They lost something rare. But by then, the empath has moved on, building a life no longer revolving around them. That is the heart of silent revenge. The empath is no longer waiting at the door. The beauty of this revenge lies in its purity. It is not born of spite, anger, or bitterness. It is born of growth and evolution. The empath doesn't set out to break the avoidant. They set out to reclaim their own life. And it is that quiet reclamation that shakes the avoidant the most. They expected tears, pleading, anger, desperate attempts to rebuild the connection. What they never expected was stillness. What they never expected was indifference. They never thought the empath would smile without them, glow with joy in new friendships, or thrive in self-love. That glow, that peace, is louder than any revenge plot could ever be. And beyond all this, there is also a spiritual side to the transformation. Super empaths often feel called to a higher purpose. Their ability to feel deeply is not just a trait, but a path, guiding them toward healing, creativity, wisdom, and connection with something greater. When they redirect their energy inward, they do not just heal themselves. They begin to align with this higher calling. Their silence then becomes not only a boundary, but also a prayer, a declaration of self-worth, and a step into the life they were always meant to live. The avoidant may continue to wrestle with emptiness, trying to fill the silence with substitutes that never satisfy. But the empath, now standing tall in their truth, learns to live with a lighter heart. They no longer measure themselves by someone else's inability to love. They understand that love, respect, and peace begin within. And when that lesson is learned, silence is no longer just the absence of words. It is the sound of freedom. They're not here only to be partners. They're here to awaken others, to mirror back truths, to bring healing, and to keep growing. When they finally break free from the avoidance cycle, they often rise to a higher level of awareness. They come to see that their empathy is a strength, not a weakness. They learn to protect it, to direct it wisely, and to give it only to those who are ready to truly receive it. And in doing this, they step into a light so powerful that even the most distant avoidant can feel the loss when it's gone. So, what does the quiet revenge of a super empath look like in real life? It looks like ignoring the late-night message. It looks like no longer needing to justify yourself. It looks like smiling at the person in the mirror and knowing you are already enough. It looks like creating a life so full that you stop hungering for tiny pieces of affection. It looks like walking forward with pride, while the avoidant is left questioning how someone they thought would never leave managed to slip away without a word. That is the revenge, not anger, not cruelty, but silence that glows with self-worth. And here is the final truth. The silence of the empath does more than punish the avoidant. It protects the empath. Because in the end, revenge is not about making someone else hurt. It is about taking back the pieces of yourself you once gave too easily. It is about giving yourself the love you used to beg for. It is about knowing that the coldness of an avoidant has nothing to do with your value and everything to do with their fear. The super empath doesn't have to shout, doesn't have to chase, doesn't have to prove a thing. Their silence carries the message, I loved you, I gave you my best, and now I choose me. So if you are a super empath who has endured the coldness of a dismissive avoidant, keep this in your heart. Your greatest revenge is not trying to change them, but in changing yourself. Your silence, your courage, and your self-love are the truest reply. And when you rise above it all, you won't just recover. You'll glow so strongly that even the avoidant who once pushed you away will feel the heavy truth of what they lost. That, my friends, is the silent revenge of a super empath.